Hi class! Thanks for clicking this video. I have a little objective to show you exactly what you're going to get out of watching this whole video through. So, at the end of this, you as a student will be able to understand and be able to apply stasis theory. So if you have been looking through the prompts and maybe some assignments for this week and for future weeks, you will have seen the words stasis theory. And you probably thought to yourself, what in the world is this and how am I going to learn? Well, your answer is here. You will watch this video and then you should have a good, clear understanding moving forward. So my first question to kind of set this up is really, really important. I want you to think about this question and answer a strong yes or a strong no. So, is a hot dog a sandwich? Think about it. Think about your really solid justification for your answer, and I'll give you just a few seconds to do that. All right. When I ask my students on site this question, surprisingly, it is a very consistent 50-50 split. So a lot of people are passionate that hot dogs are sandwiches, and then others are passionate that they are not. So whichever camp you fall into, I want you to think about your answer and hold on to it as we now discuss it and talk about it in terms of stasis theory. So this theory basically is this four-tiered, four-leveled approach that lets us categorize arguments of different sources and say, where do they align, where do they agree, and then where is it that they start to disagree. So the way that this system kind of works is that it starts with facts and then it builds into definition. These two build into quality, and then lastly it culminates into policy. So you'll see if two sources maybe disagree at the level of definition, they will also disagree at the quality level and the policy level. If they perhaps agree at facts and definition, that's possible. It could be quality where they start to disagree, and then that would affect policy. If they disagree at the factual level, then everything will be disagreement, and it is very likely that those two sources will never be able to agree. So let's break down each of these levels using that hot dog as a sandwich as an example, and then I'll bring in another example too, just so you can kind of clearly see what it is that I'm talking about when I throw these terms around. So first we have this foundational level of facts. It is just what it sounds like it is. So this is where two sources have to agree or disagree on the facts of whatever has happened. Does something exist? Did something really happen? What are the facts here? Is there even a problem or an issue to talk about? So when we talk about our hot dog example, whether or not you believe hot dogs are sandwiches, you are going to believe that hot dogs do, in fact, exist. Boom. That's a check right there. You all are going to, most likely, I hope, agree on the fact that a hot dog exists. Now I'm going to bring in another example that we're going to talk about in tandem to kind of give you a more serious kind of example. And it's way less fun. But just the classic example in the literature, if you read up on stasis theory, is going to be a murder trial. Okay, so if you go into a murder trial at court, the first thing that everyone has to agree on is, did somebody die? The facts of the matter, did somebody die? Now, if that is not agreed upon, then there is no more trial, right? And the same goes for if someone is saying that a hot dog doesn't exist, then the argument with someone who says, yes, a hot dog exists and it's a sandwich, that argument will never find common ground. The argument is done. Um, but if we do agree that someone died, if we do agree that hot dogs exist, we can move on to issues of definition. This too has a pretty good and easily understandable title definition, which is we're going to break down different parts of the issue and ask how are they related? In other words, how do we define different parts of this issue? When we're talking about the hot dogs, I usually let my students, I break them up and they walk to a side of the room, whether or not they think that hot dogs are sandwiches or they are not sandwiches, and I just let them go at it. I let them argue with each other and talk about different reasons they have on either side, and I just listen to try to observe where people tend to diverge on this issue, which is really what you want to do when you're researching too. You want to listen to every side, just take it in, and then start to see, how can I put these things into conversation? Where is it that I'm seeing they do agree? Where is it that I'm seeing they just don't agree? So in listening to my students, I have found that it is the definition of sandwich, which really is like the pinpoint crux of the issue of whether or not hot dogs are sandwiches. Some people will define a sandwich as meat in between bread. In that case, you have to admit that hot dogs are sandwiches. But others counter that a sandwich has to be made of two totally separate pieces of bread with meat in the middle of that. In which case, a hot dog whose bun is one piece, according to some, cannot be a sandwich. So this is us defining sandwich, a part of the issue, and we're seeing, okay, that's where the disagreement starts. Now, if we're bringing back the murder incident example, if we agree that someone has died, now we have to define that death. Was this death really murder? Or was it suicide? Was it a horrible car accident that no one was to blame for? Was this a medical issue that caused the person to die? Was this person just old? There are all kinds of deaths. There's not just murder, and that's it. So, sorry, I got a package. So we have to define the nature of that death. If we can agree that it was in fact murder, then we can move on. But once again, if it's not, the trial is done. So now we're going to move on to the top two tiers of stasis theory, and this is where things tend to get a little complicated and a little more murky. So that's why I really have these questions posted. I'll post this PowerPoint so that you can refer back to it. But now we have to think about the quality of the issue. Is it a good or bad thing? What is it that we're valuing here? What are the costs of solving the problem or issue? In other words, who or whom, technically, might it affect? What stakeholders? What is at risk here? So if we talk about the hot dog example again, if we throw it out here, we throw it out there that hot dogs are not sandwiches. What would that mean? Would that mean that hot dogs can't be sold where sandwiches are sold? Firehouse Subs, do they sell hot dogs? Well, they shouldn't. What about a sub sandwich? Is that even a sandwich if the bread connects in a sub sandwich like a meatball sub? You can see this is kind of silly, but you get the idea. What are the costs of solving this problem or issue? You can also go into it at a different angle that still falls under quality. If you think about the murder example. So let's say, yes, someone died. Yes, it was murder. Now we have to kind of give some kind of quality, some kind of value to the murder? Was it out of rage? Was this person insane? Can they claim insanity? Was this revenge? Was it self-defense? What had that person done to evoke this person on trial to murder them, right? Was this person a robber in their house? There are all of these different questions that we have to decide on. And if we can finally decide, say it's first-degree murder, then we can go into the last stage, which is policy. That is, what do we do now that we've sorted through everything? We know the facts, we know the definition, we know the quality. So what do we do? In the murder case, the question comes down to, okay, send him to jail for life? Does he have to be executed? Does this person go on probation? Does he have to go to rehab? What do we actually do? What are the actionable steps? What is the policy that comes out of this? For the hot dog example, do we stop selling hot dogs where all sandwiches are sold? Do we say all things that have meat inside some kind of breading are sandwiches? Is a ravioli a sandwich? Is a Pop-Tart a sandwich? How do we move forward? And so a lot of times your sources are going to disagree in terms of policy. But it's not enough to just say, my two sources, they're disagreeing on the level of policy. More than likely, they're going to be disagreeing on some kind of level that came before. Maybe it's the definition of something. Maybe it's the quality of something. But it's your job to investigate where it is that they actually do agree and where it is they start to deteriorate without just jumping to policy. Now, how do you use this? Well, you can use it within the same stakeholder or you can use it among different stakeholders. So let me give you an example. One of y'all is actually talking about vaccines. And that example really stuck out to me in terms of stasis theory. How you could say that one stakeholder is really disagreeing, and then you can also say this one stakeholder collectively is disagreeing with this stakeholder collectively, right? So let me give some life to that example. Let's say your one stakeholder, maybe this is the one stakeholder that you are going to be talking about in your annotated bibliography, is parents. We all know that parents have so many different opinions, right? So with vaccines, some parents are going to say that it is my right to vaccinate my child or not. So maybe, and then other parents are going to say it is my obligation as a citizen to have my child vaccinated for the sake of general health of all people, of humanity, right? So maybe you could say, yes, these are two sources within my same stakeholder, parents, who disagree on the level of, well, not facts. They agree that vaccines exist. Definition, well, yes, they could disagree on the definition of freedom. They could disagree on the level of what it is to be a parent, what it is to be a citizen. And then that would affect their quality and policy of whether or not they vaccinate their children. You can also have different stakeholders disagree. You could say parents want the right in how they define parenthood to be the choices they make for their children. And doctors are saying, no, actually the definition of parenthood is to do what's best for your children, and vaccines are what's best. It's what science, and as the doctor in this health profession, that's what science says. These are the different things you can think of, and I hope that you work to incorporate this into your own work and your own research.